It's not Christmas yet, but for some, it's Christmas for them, and they received an early Christmas present. Maybe because a recruit signed their name on the dotted line and they are going to be attending college and playing for either Pitt, West Virginia, or Penn State. This is our College Sports Now Network National Signing Day show. We are live. Mike Asti, Mike Vukovcan joining you here. We're going to have many of our Sports Now beat writers and contributors joining us throughout this broadcast, and also be joined by a national writer who's with us amongst our Sports Now networks in Mike Farrell at the end to kind of recap it all. But we are, of course, going to talk about how Pitt did, how West Virginia did, how Penn State did, and really the overall day here of National Signing Day, the early period here in December. But Mike, we got Christmas ahead. I know this is kind of a holiday for you, though, every year. This is a day to get excited. A lot of news obviously churns. We're very busy on the respective sites. Of course, a lot goes on. Some surprises existed. A lot of it kind of is what we thought, which in this day and age, you do get a lot of kids saying they're committed. Sometimes they stick, sometimes they don't. Most of the time they do now. And obviously this is a different era, though, with the transfer portal. Some could argue that the recruiting season is not as important and that you got to lock these kids in. And if you lock them in, that means they're only there for 1 year. That doesn't mean they're there for 2 or 3 years. It has turned some people off. They also could argue that the way to build a team these days is through the portal. I know that Pitt in particular has certainly taken that route this season, and others have in past years, or even trying to do again this year. But recruiting season certainly still important and is still a bedrock of a program for sure. So before we get fully into it and bring some of our guests on, what are your thoughts on National Signing Day today, how the day unfolded for you, certainly amongst to any of the teams we cover here throughout the Sports Now family of networks? Just an overlying thought in terms of this really being the first year, because this isn't the first year of the portal, but this is really the first year where the portal and the recruiting season kind of marry together, and it's fully impacting recruiting season because now there's windows involved. Now there's a whole nother class of kids that got involved. NIL deals. Rodney Gallagher, who does sign with the VU, had an NIL deal in high school. That was not a thing in PA prior to this year. So a lot more involved this year to fully get it underway with the portal and the recruiting season. But we've now seen it. There's more to happen. What are your thoughts as we start things off?
Well, it's interesting. You mentioned my affinity for recruiting. It's actually 7 years ago. This is my reason for.
It's how we got here.
Yeah, so my reason for wanting to start Pittsburgh Sports Now while I was still working at KDKA.
Right.
Just because I don't know, I'm not sure why, but I was always fascinated by it. I followed it. Was a huge fan of, still a big fan of Chris Peaks over at Rivals. Was always talking to him about recruiting. So I was always in it. But 7 years ago to where we are, man, has it changed? It's changed.
Would you ever have predicted it? Not only the success of the networks overall and getting other media members involved like myself, but just the landscape too.
The landscape is, and I don't know that it's a good thing. I guess it's a good thing for the kids. But it's completely changed, and I don't know that it's going to go back. I guess the only thing that could stop it is if something changes in regards to transfers having to sit out a year. If they go back to that, I think that could change things. I think in the near future, I'm not sure when, but something has to change with the NIL. I think it's still going to exist to some form,
right.
But the way it's currently being done isn't going to be around long term. It's just not sustainable as far as everything that you want to say about it. The sliminess of it.
There's legal tampering now.
Yeah,
sure.
Just everything. It's not going to, the way it is, it's not going to be
kids are going places
the way
for
we
just
see
money.
it.
Yeah.
But it's changed, and the biggest thing I don't want to get into all that area because I don't want to bore the.
We could do a whole show on that, honestly.
Yeah,
for sure.
The biggest thing that I think it's changed, and I think somebody's going to eventually do this. Who knows? Maybe we can do this. Come up with some computer genius and come up with this idea, but I think recruiting rankings. So many fans of teams put so much stock into it. Where's my team ranked? And I'm down from the up.
We bring it up. I mean,
yeah. To me,
right?
right now, because of the transfer portal, recruiting rankings as they're currently done right now are meaningless, and I don't think fans should look into it or really care where they're ranked. And the reason I say that is because teams are recruiting completely different. We can get into this with Mike Farrell. Teams are recruiting now, instead of recruiting a high school kid, they're trying to fill their needs through the transfer portal.
Right. That's part of recruiting.
Yeah.
100%. Pitt in particular into the portal this year, more so than really even worrying about the high school kids, losing Kenny Minchie and picking up other veterans. And then West Virginia, for example, on the flip side, they brought in a transfer quarterback from the portal each of the last several seasons. And then Neil Brown says now they're not going to go that route and going to stick to who's on the roster. There's two different ends of it, but you can lose a lot. You can also fix a lot of the roster quickly. And it almost feels like some coaches probably are thinking to themselves, if I don't go to the portal, then I'm going to be at a major disadvantage.
Yeah, and I'm talking in the regards of, Pitt picks up Donovan McMillan, who's probably going to start at one of their safety positions.
Who they recruited before. He's a local kid.
Yeah, but that doesn't show up when you look at their 19 recruits. If you use Rivals, that's not part of their 19 commitments as far as a good get. And it could be argued that Donovan McMillan or Phil Jerkovic are the most valuable recruits that Pitt picked up this year, but they're not part
100%.
of like 19. So they don't get credit for that. So that's why I don't.
And I don't know how you would equate that, because obviously with the portal, people say they're going to get in the portal, then they officially get in the portal. Then there's that period, and we've seen in basketball, you have to get it approved, and it's a different wire to walk. Obviously, kids are going in and out of the portal, and it's something that's happening.
What I'm saying is there has to be, from now on, somebody's probably gonna do it. Who knows? Maybe next year or whenever. Somebody has to come up with a ranking that you combine high school recruits with transfer gets at the time to really try to come up with how a team did in the offseason. There's a ranking on Donovan McMillan. He's a 4-star kid. You just don't know how to put that into a for Pitt's team rankings for this year. Somebody's going to come up with an idea.
Do you change? Because I know, like, we see a lot of transfers. You look at the star they were out of high school, and he was somebody in McMillan that he went to Florida.
Yeah.
Didn't play as much as maybe he's going to play at Pitt. And maybe in retrospect, that might not have been the best decision for him in terms of getting on the field, but that's where he went at the time. This now could get him more of an opportunity, but he was 4-star out of high school, but then didn't really get on the field that much to have a major impact in his year that he was at Florida. So do you grade him if you're doing those rankings and make him a 3-star now because you don't have a 4-star tape on him in college? That actually might bring him down. And maybe the kids don't want that then, and that actually might hurt the rankings. So there might be two ends of it. But obviously a veteran, you would figure, and coaches are thinking this, a veteran with experience, even if only in a few games, even if mostly in special teams, even with spotty starts on defense, and he'll be certainly a defensive guy, that's generally speaking for a coach better than somebody who's fresh out of high school, because you don't know what you're going to get and they have to go through your whole program and learn the college game, etc. You want experience over not experience at any level of sports. So that's why they're going to the portal.
Yeah, that's I don't know what the answer is as far as what ranking you give them, but that's why I just don't think fans should freak out that you look at Pitt and they're ranked 48th. It doesn't really be, by the end of this, by the time they're done in February over this next month, they're going to pick up Karl. If we bring Karl in, we could talk about what they're probably going to target over the next month, and they're going to probably pick up, I would guess, I don't know, 3 to 4, maybe more recruits or as far as transfers, but that's not going to go into their class of 2023 team ranking. So Pitt will do a good job this offseason. I think they're going to, as I've tweeted a million times, they're going to clean up in the transfer portal. They are. Yeah. So that's how you're going to evaluate them. And I just don't think fans not just for Pitt, for West Virginia, Penn State, whoever,
100%.
really paid much attention to national recruiting rankings from now on.
Yeah. And even on the flip side, because Pitt right now, if we're going to go to 24, and we'll bring on Karl here in a moment, if we're going to go to 24/7 rivals and on 3, for example, here, you got Pitt 48, 48, 50 in that order. WVU 41, 37 for rivals, which is a top 40 class for a program that's been 3 out of 4 losing seasons and a coach in the hot seat. That's a pretty good solid ranking. But then 42 for on 3. PSU 14, 15, and 14. So on the flip side to it, you can't really grade Pitt off 48, 48, and 50 because they're doing so much in the transfer pool and trying to bring in veterans to get back to where they were 2 years ago. But even Penn State, and they're coming off a Rose Bowl, it's not like it's been a bad season at all for Penn State fans, even though some want to be negative. But you don't know that it's going to be 14th best in the world based on what you're seeing here, because it's 14 in a recruiting class. But if maybe somebody who got a 20th recruiting class did really well in the transfer portal, they might be better off than you. So that's all to be figured out here. Mike Vukovcan, Mike Asti, there's our college sports now, WVU, Pitt, and Penn State conversation, as well as the national scene here for National Signing Day. We now are going to bring on Karl Ludwig, who is our Pitt football beat writer, as we will be talking all things Panthers here, certainly the flagship there at PSN. So, Karl, I know it's been a busy day for you, and I guess I'll lead you in kind of what we were just talking about, and I'm sure you heard the conversation there with Mike and I on how do you think this recruiting class right now that Pitt put together, which when you look at where they are geographically, when you look at what's going on in Western Pennsylvania, when you look at the success of the program the last couple of years, even an 8-win season that some are saying down, an ACC title and a Heisman candidate before, people are going to say if you didn't have the transfer portal, well, the Pitt program has been way better than West Virginia for the past few years, but why are they barely getting in the top 50 and WVU's flirting with top 40 or top 35? But as Mike brought up, that's not fair because Pitt's doing really well in the transfer portal. So number one, how would you evaluate Pitt's recruiting class, and how does that get into the transfer conversation on what they're going to do to build this team, and how should fans really look at this for Pitt? Because they might not be thrilled with these numbers in terms of these ranks off of the program and what it's been, but that might not really tell the story.
Yes, I mean, I guess first of all, they entered today with 18, and then they added a player today, but they entered the day with 19 targets. They got all 19 of them signed today. They had 3 transfer targets, all 3 of them signed today. So in terms of locking them down today and fending off any interest outside the program, job well done. It was a 100% batting average today. So, I mean, that's always gonna be nice to do. If you're gonna land every single guy you plan to land is always nice. And then the class as a whole, there's some, I mean, number wise doesn't look that great. 48 doesn't look great, but there are some real pieces here. You've got like Jordan Bass, a linebacker from Virginia, who Pitt is in love with. They think he's a superstar. He's not enrolling early, unfortunately, but he's a guy that will play a lot for them. Just today, they got Isaiah Neal, who Narduzzi said would be a future captain, or he'd be shocked if he wasn't a captain. They have Shadarian Harrison from Florida, who they fended off interest from Oregon and Florida State and Miami. I mean, there's some real pieces here. It's not, some of the guys might not have the best offer sheets. They might not have the highest rankings on 247 arrivals, but Pitt's done well finding these guys who sometimes fly under the radar. And they have some guys here who have done that, but also some guys who are some real game changers in the program. So it doesn't, like, looking at it from an outside perspective, doesn't look like they didn't capitalize on this ACC championship, but it's a good class. They have some guys here who will play. Maybe even next year, a couple of guys might be on the field. We'll see. But from just the high school class, it's a solid class.
Yeah, I think you touched upon one of them. I think they did a really good job. There was a lot of speculation. You mentioned Shadarian Harrison from Florida. He's a guy that he was one of their early guys, and he was sort of under the radar guy. Charlie Partridge picked up. I believe he was the main recruiter, maybe Corey Sanders in there as well. But Florida State, Miami, and maybe Florida, they were trying to flip him. He's an ideal.
Yeah,
he's from one of the top
school down there.
Yeah. at Lakeland High School, one of the top. That's where they got Damari Mathis, who's with
The Broncos now.
the Broncos.
Yeah, that's a known high school down there
Yeah.
for sure. That's been years and years.
One of the best in
he's
the country.
he's a
Yeah.
prototype guy,
Right.
6'1", 6'2" cornerback. He will be a big time player in Pitt system. And the other guy that there were some worries about, and maybe some thinking, was Lamar Seymour, receiver out of Miami. Some people thought that maybe at the last minute he might have some thoughts about staying home. Pitt was able to do that. I have a question for you, Karl, because I know it's been the talk of Pitt fans the last 24 hours. You don't see this very often. I can't remember the last time I've seen it. Is Zion Fowler. He was Pitt's first commitment in the class of 2023. He decommitted a month ago. Then all of a sudden, yesterday, he recommitted to Pitt day before signing. When a kid decommits, very rarely, and like I said, I can't remember the last time it happens. What do you make of that? Because we were waiting for a shoe to drop. Maybe they take him back on, and because it's very weird. They have 4 wide receiver commitments out of 19 total recruits. What do you make of that whole situation and him coming back on after decommitting a month ago?
Yeah, so today Pat actually said that in his 33 years of coaching, it's never happened before, or if it has, it hasn't happened in recent history. But he said that he's one of the guys who may have had too much outside noise in his ear. He may have had too many people kind of trying to coach him through the process here. And he said that he took a step back, kind of reevaluated, and realized that Pitt was his best option, and they were happy to take him back.
Yeah, you got to remember that his decommitting came right after Kenny Minchey decommitted. So
right.
There was, he talked. When I talked to him, I remember the day that he decommitted. He said part of the reason he did that was because of Kenny dropping out. Touch upon Isaiah Neal. He's the only 4-star guy per Rivals and 247 that Pitt got. The Pitt knows how to recruit defensive linemen, and they know how to coach. More importantly, coach defensive linemen. Just talk to me about what was said today from Narduzzi regarding Neal. And I didn't hear the press conference, but I'm assuming the leadership skills that he's been the leader of Pitt's class in terms of being vocal online.
Yeah, I mean, he was one of the first guys to come in. He's been one of the strongest kind of bonds they've had since then. I mean, he's a big-time kid from a big-time program in St. Francis out in Washington, D.C. He's not the biggest, like today Pat mentioned that he's not the biggest kid at 6'2", 270. But if anyone has success with undersized defensive linemen, it's going to be Charlie Partridge. But he's a big-time kid. His production at St. Francis is very good, but what today's message was, he's a leader. He will be a leader, if not next year, then as a sophomore or the junior. He's a guy that Pat said has almost uncanny leadership ability. He's a special ability in being a leader of men, being a guy who can come in and immediately draw the eyes and draw the respect of his teammates. So Pitt has their leadership units. They have the Eagles. And I imagine he'll be a top guy next, even as a true freshman, in terms of bringing guys along with him on the defensive line and on the defense as a whole. Pitt is very high on him.
Karl, Ludwig, Mike Vukovcan, Mike Asti here, Sports Now College Side, as we're talking National Signing Day right now, having a conversation about Pitt and how Pitt did, but obviously that also plays into Pitt having success in the transfer portal, bringing in a veteran QB with some local flavor, bringing in another local kid on the defensive side, but also a lot more going on through the portal for Pitt and going to go on as well. And Karl, you mentioned here at the top that you have the perfect batting average. So you might have pie in the sky thinking that let me just get all the 5 stars in the world, but that's not realistic. That's never going to happen, no matter what being the case. So you go for your guys that you're in love with and you bat 1,000. You do have Kenny Minchey decommitting a month ago. As Mike mentioned, very rare, and I can't remember this really happening either, having somebody decommit and then recommit to you. I don't know if his thoughts were I want to go with Kenny, but then Notre Dame didn't want me, so I'm going to come back to Pitt. Maybe that's a conspiracy theory. But when you have a perfect batting average, you're going to be happy. But in terms of positions of need, what Pitt's team needs for not only this coming season, because that's probably mostly going to be impacted through the portal, but beyond when you're thinking recruiting, do you feel like Pitt was successful in filling positions of need, not even just falling in love with individual players? And what else maybe could Pitt have done? Because they batted 1,000. They did lose a decommit a month ago, but who they have now, they batted 1,000. But maybe what Pitt could have done in terms of trying to fill other spots, or maybe what they could have done better in recruiting, since nothing's obviously perfect.
Yeah, well, I think the high school class has done it. It fills a lot of needs. They didn't get a tight end, which is kind of surprising, but I imagine they'll fill that gap with a veteran guy. But I mean, they got a young quarterback, a project guy who will grow in the system now. They got 2 running backs, which is an area of need with the lack of younger guys there. They have 4 receivers. They have a bunch of linemen, couple DNs, couple defensive tackles, 3 linebackers who Narduzzi said was his best haul ever at Pitt, and then a couple of defensive backs. So they hit a lot of areas on the roster in terms of high school class. There's still some holes on the roster, but that's more of a transfer portal kind of thing now going forward, which I imagine they'll hit on pretty hard.
Yeah, looking ahead, I think there's one tight end, the kid out of California that came in for an official visit. I don't believe last time I checked an hour ago, he hadn't signed yet. He made an official visit the last week. I guess he could be an option, but I agree with you. I think in terms of future needs, I could still see Pitt getting 4 to 5 possibly transfers, at least 3 to 4.
Yeah, I think so too.
Yeah, I think they're going to pick up another receiver, which is kind of surprising, which maybe leads to believe that, somebody that's currently on the roster might not, maybe a couple guys won't be there after the bowl game. Wouldn't shock me if maybe they went out and tried to get a veteran offensive lineman.
I think a running back would be an area too.
Yeah, they're going to lose 4 starting, possibly 5 veteran senior offensive linemen, and they're going to have all underclassmen. So it wouldn't surprise me if they go out and try to get somebody that's has some experience.
Yeah,
and also a defensive end. I know they like their talent there, but you're going to be losing. Yeah, you're losing Desmond Alexander. You're losing Haba. You're losing John Morgan. I could see them. I know they like Nakai Johnson and Dayon Hayes and everyone, but they're big in the leadership veterans. So it wouldn't surprise me if they try to pluck one of those up. But I don't think they're done. I wanted to touch on one other thing too. I know people look at who Pitt got and who Pitt didn't get, but I think they need to keep this in mind too, is that as Mike mentioned, Kenny Minchie decommitted. He's a 4-star cornerback. Jason Pinnock, who was in Pitt's recruiting class since June. Pitt's very good at spotting talent, evaluating talent, so I think fans should trust them. Jason Pinnock, a guy that wasn't high, he was well recruited. He didn't go crazy. He was a 3-star recruit. He decommits a month ago.
You mean Bryce Pollock?
Bryce Pollock. Yeah, I think Jason Pinnock. Bryce Pollock.
You're going back to
another cornerback.
Mike's been doing this a while. I think we talked about that.
Bryce Pollock out of Georgia. He was a 3-star kid. After he decommits from Pitt, he gets bumped up to a 4-star cornerback, commits to Mississippi State, and then another kid that was a June commit, Shelton Lewis, 3-star kid. Yeah. He signs a letter of intent today with Clemson.
Yeah, if you're losing kids, you're losing to Notre Dame, to Clemson. Yeah, you're evaluating the talent. You're a runner-up to behemoth programs.
Yeah,
right.
Pitt,
every program,
I think fan base should trust them.
Right. Yeah, most programs would lose those kids to those schools. Yeah, Kenny Minchie didn't have Notre Dame wanting him before, and then once he gets Notre Dame, you can't deny Notre Dame. So that exists, right?
Well, and they've also lost guys. Like Notre Dame's lost guys, Clemson's lost guys,
100%.
Alabama's lost guys. I mean, it happens. It's not going to
100%. Yeah,
like
you're as Mike always talks about, the transfer portal is gonna, no one's gonna be safe. The transfer portal holds no prejudice. You're gonna have an ability to go in and out, and that means that you could have a national champion lose kids for whatever reason. So every program is certainly vulnerable to the transfer portal either way.
One other thing with Karl before we
last thing with Karl for
is
sure.
I think, Karl, it's going to be interesting over the next few years. And I know Kenny, I hate to keep bringing him up, but he was obviously a big loss at the time. However, they were able to fill that, and I should have remembered. I bring up Jerkovic and Donovan McMillan. I forgot Christian Valou, quarterback they got from Penn State. I think those two guys are going to be linked in terms of watching how their careers develop. Christian Valou is going to come to Penn State, or coming from Penn State. He's going to get a chance here, either this year, depending on what happens with health-wise with Phil, or definitely next year. It remains to be seen what Minchie's future at Notre Dame will be. I know he signed there, but a lot of kids sign at Notre Dame. Let's see when he gets on the field, and let's see if he sticks at how long he sticks at Notre Dame, or hits the transfer portal early. It wouldn't shock me early on if Christian Valou has more of a impact, and we'll see long term who has a better career. But it's definitely going to be something interesting to follow over the next few years, because those two guys traded places in terms of Pitt's quarterback depth chart.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And of course, unlike maybe years ago, because the transfer portal, it's hard to grade an offseason just off the recruiting class alone. Mike Vukovcan, Mike Asti, that was Karl Ludwig here, our Pitt football beat writer, as we talked Pitt Panthers here on our National Signing Day show, National Signing Day. So, Karl, just last one as we get you out of here, just give me a letter grade for Pitt.
If we're going overall transfer and high school, or
yes, that's the way we'll do it. Start grading things.
Overall, I give him a solid B, strong B.
Okay. All right. Okay. Well, again, Karl Ludwig here. Find him at Pittsburgh Sports Now and on social media. We now are going to be bringing in. That means we are going to close up shop with our cleanup hitter to hit a home run or two for us. Mike Vukovcan and Mike Asti will now bring in, and this is Mike, and Mike. We'll now bring in the third Mike of the trio here, Mike Farrell, our national college football analyst and writer within the Sports Now family of networks. So, Mike, thanks for joining us. I know you're obviously a very, very busy man on this day. That's kind of like Christmas, but maybe I saw your gift to what I asked for, maybe not as much as it was in recent years because of the portal. Any surprises for you on this day? How do you think these teams did? I know you're listening to a lot of this show. Do you agree with anything that's been said so far in terms of Pitt, West Virginia, and Penn State, but even nationally?
I missed the Pitt part, the West Virginia part when you talk about the locals. As was mentioned, I don't know who said it, but it's right. I mean, you really don't know anything.
Right.
If this is a political state, if this was a Florida or Texas or California or Ohio or a state that produces a ton of talent, you're kind of beholden to at least give those kids an extra look and not take a kid from Florida over a local Ohio kid. It could come bite you in the butt, if you do that, but not West Virginia. I mean, these kids, they all, are trying to get attention. They're all trying to go beyond Group of Five or FCS. But you take the ones you feel will fit. There's no political requirement here. It doesn't matter if you can not get back into that school because there isn't a big power school there. So Neil Brown and his staff, they have to recruit. I've always said this about West Virginia. There is no home recruiting territory for them. They have to hit Western PA. They have to hit Maryland, the DMV area, and they have to spot recruit down southeast, but also hit Texas, hit California, hit Ohio, which they got away from for a few years, which was puzzling to me, and they're back recruiting there again. And just hope to put together a class of 25 kids or so, where you could be pulling, kids from 15 states. And that's really a disadvantage, and it's why West Virginia is never in the top 25. And you can't be with the disadvantages that they have. So anything between 25 and 30 is great. Anything between 25 and 35 is excellent and really the goal, I think, for West Virginia. Penn State, we talked about top 10. That would be great. It's not an effort thing. So Florida was an interesting discussion before because, people think it's easy to recruit Florida because there's so many kids there. And we talk about the big three, Miami, Florida State, and Florida, but there's UCF now. They're a Power 5 program. Everybody goes into Florida. Everybody. Every team in the SEC and the ACC, every team in the Big Ten. So for James Franklin, Daniel Harris was lost today. That's a tough loss because you put so much effort in, and at the last second, you can snap your fingers and just lose somebody to a home state program that comes in the last second and makes him a priority, or a program like UGA when he was kind of maybe 5th or 6th on their list. So there's really a balance there, but you have to stay in there. I know schools, West Virginia being one of them, that kind of started to shy away from Florida for a little while because they lost so many down the stretch. You have to put in the work and just hope for the best. And I think that's what all three of these, Pitt is doing it as well. But there's a lot of heartbreak, and fans don't understand that you're going to lose more than you get.
Yeah, and that's why Pitt, Charlie Partridge is such a valuable guy on the Pitt staff. As you mentioned, every school, it's not something unique to go try to recruit Florida, but you have to have the right guys with the right reputation and the right contacts to recruit that state. Mike, Pitt, the Pitt fans, when they won the ACC championship last season, instantly fans think that that's going to result in a huge spike in recruiting rankings. What's your take on what Pat Narduzzi did this year? And is that fair to think that there should have been an instant spike, or is that a gradual thing and time in as far as being able to win, and then you'll start seeing the benefits of that?
You should see a spike the next year. So if you win, in the 2021 season, you should see, a spike the next recruiting year, 2022, and so on and so on. So that's disappointing from that perspective. You don't want to have right now, I think they're in the 45 to 50 range nationally on most of the sites. And, that's not great. You don't want that. Should it be an area of concern? Yeah. But will it be made up in the portal? That's the big question that we never had before. If you have a clunker of a recruiting class, and I'm not disparaging this class at all, but if I'm a Pitt fan, and I've always been honest with everybody about everything. Aaron Donald has a 3-star kid back in the day, and I had to tell everybody why, and I was wrong, and I'm dumb. I'll always just tell you the truth. Doesn't matter. I don't think I'm right all the time.
Opinions can change. No one's going to bat 1,000. We get it.
So here's the thing. I'm not here to tell Pitt fans, this is great. It's not, but you can make up for it in the portal now, and you couldn't do that years ago. And I think that plays to the strategy as well. So we talk about staying in there for certain kids and having certain kids make demands. And Kenny Minchie is a good example of this, and not a demanding kid, not a kid that I want to make millions. But a Notre Dame rolls in, knocks on the door, comes in with a nice NIL package for him. It's a bigger program. You're going to fight, but you can also say, this one we're not going to win. Let's focus on the portal and see what we can get there. Now, you'd want a 4-star developmental quarterback. Some have him as a 3. I think he's right on that border. I'm not as high on him as some other people are nationally. But then you can adjust. You can get your portal quarterbacks, and then the next year to try to get that developmental kid that maybe is a 4-star. So my point here is Pitt's class is disappointing. There's no doubt in my mind. Right? I'm not going to lie to you and sell you. But the portal can make up for it. And I think that's where you have to focus.
And that's where Pitt has focused, because out of these 3 schools, could certainly say that Pitt's had the most success this offseason in terms of adding from the portal. So that is kind of the plan, that they're trying to continue the beat to go on and do it from the portal. But of course, you do need to also look to recruiting, and top 50, when even another school like, say, West Virginia is in the top 40, and they're also near you an hour away, and they've been worse the last 3 or 4 years, that maybe doesn't make Pitt fans too excited. But as you mentioned, the portal is an entire different a ball of wax to this. So, Mike, I do want to kind of ask you, in terms of either, any of these 3 schools, Justin Benton, flips from West Virginia to Houston. Dana Holgerson, the former Mountaineer coach, grabs him. They had a visit 2 days ago. Prior to that, he was always committed to West Virginia. That was kind of a surprise for the Mountaineers staff. They kind of admitted. So, but is it that one? Is there anything else? Pitt, Penn State, maybe even outside that was a surprise for you? A lot of this were Pitt went 19 for 19. West Virginia lost Benton, but otherwise got most of their guys they reasonably thought they were going to get. They were in top 5 for Snowden, but they probably were never really going to get him. And then Penn State top 15 class again, and they're in the Rose Bowl. Any surprises though that happened, or is it Benton?
No, I mean Snowden we all knew was going to be Wisconsin.
Right. He went with Fickle, right?
Yeah, and it was. I mean, it's one of those things where you don't want to. You want to be positive about it and confident about it. You don't want to ruin the moment for the kid. But that was one the staff knew that he was gone as well. So you don't want surprises, honestly. You really don't.
No.
So I think it's good that there aren't a lot of surprises. I mean, you want positive surprises. You'd love to be Oregon today, where you're stealing kids this and that.
Sure,
but you also don't want to be. You also don't want to be Oregon right now because they stole Peyton Bennett. Peyton Bowen from Notre Dame, and he hasn't sent his letter in. And now they're scrambling, and now he's talking to Notre Dame again, and this could drag out. And it's just, there comes a point.
There have been kids that announced they aren't going to sign today now that some teams thought they locked in. Right.
Which, impacts Penn State for sure. But that's good news, because obviously that could have gone a different way. But yeah, there's a lot of kids that are sort of like hemming and hawing. And honestly, in my experience with these kids is, the dramatic kids, the ones you fight and fight and fight for the most, are the ones that don't pan out or transfer or aren't great for the locker room. So boring. I mean, listen, there's no way. Penn State's class, I think, is very good, and I've written about how good it is. Did they miss at quarterback? Yeah, they did. They'll make up for that, though. They're an attractive enough program where they'll get somebody in the portal and they'll revamp next year. Now, James Franklin has had sort of a history of kind of whiffing on quarterbacks, so that's a concern. But he also took Trace McSorley, who I had as a defensive back, who I didn't think could ever play quarterback, and he turned out to be, pretty good. And then, Will Levis transferring. Oh my God, Sean Clifford sucks. Will Levis, you just never know. Will Levis was horrible this year. Sean Clifford was very serviceable. You don't know. Star rankings and quarterbacks, sometimes it's easy, like Trevor Lawrence, and sometimes you're just going to whiff. And it's all about developmental. So I'm not worried about that in that class. Penn State's class, I think, is very good. Top 15 class is what you want every year. You're not going to beat Ohio State, but if you could be there with Michigan and be that second or third team in the Big Ten every year, great, perfect. West Virginia's class, a big surprise to me. Neil Brown on the hottest of hot seats all year long, gets another year, but kind of honestly a dead man walking as a coach because he's got to do it this year. This isn't it. There's not going to be another year.
That's hard to sell in the living room. That I don't know if I'm going to be here for. The athletic director is saying, I don't know if you're going to be there for a year. You're trying to sell these kids. And as you know, a lot of these kids flat out said the reason why Gallagher went to Penn State and visited, or the reason why they were waffling, is because they wanted Brown to stay. They were not going to probably commit if Brown was fired. So these kids in this solid recruiting class, they're all in with Brown, but he can't guarantee that he'll be there in a year, even if they're still there.
No, he can't. And it's really hard to recruit that way, which is why I think it's such a great job that's been done by the staff, because, you didn't have a good year. The guy was, fired 1 week, given another chance the next week, and on and on. And that's really hard to sell in living rooms. It's really hard to really put together a recruiting class, and so I look at it compared to Pitt, because you should always compare West Virginia to Pitt geographically. They're located near there. And that's kind of the bar. Narduzzi, there is no question whether he was going to be the coach. It was a disappointing year for sure, but for West Virginia to have a better and higher ranked recruiting class than Pitt, that's impressive. West Virginia did a very good job this year. Is he the guy? I don't know. We're going to find out, but you could easily have one of those 50 to 60 ranked recruiting classes with the guy on the hot seat here. So if I'm a West Virginia fan, I'm happy with what I see recruiting wise. If I'm a Pitt fan, I'm disappointed. And if I'm a Penn State fan, I'm never satisfied, because Penn State fans are never satisfied.
They are not, no.
But I understand, this is a good class. This is a class that, we can actually compete in the Big Ten when they get rid of divisions. That will certainly help. So I'd be probably content if I'm a Penn State fan.
Hey, Mike, it's never too early to look ahead a little bit. I've already gotten questions about this, and I don't. I have a guess, but I have no idea. But really, the three big prospects in Western Pennsylvania this year or next year, class of 2024: Quentin Martin, Cam Lindsey, and Anthony Specca. Pitt have any chance at any of those three? If so, which player do they have the most realistic chance at possibly trying to get?
So this was another thing I was going to talk about a little bit is, and obviously you got Western PA, you've got Eastern PA, you got a mix of what's going on there. The WPIAL is way down, and it's been down for years. I think the last time the WPIAL was really, really elite and good was when Dave Wannstedt was recruiting at Pitt, which is a very, very long time ago. And that's hurt Pitt a lot. It used to be let's fend off Notre Dame and Ohio State and Michigan for our WPIAL kids, or maybe some Southeast teams who come up and try to steal kids. That's our battle, but we've got a home field advantage. Now they're recruiting on the road a lot more. Pitt, for these kids, Quentin Martin, first of all, is going to be a guy that everybody in the world comes after. Now, is it attractive to play at Pitt? Yeah. He's a running back. And the way their offense is structured, you're going to get a ton of carries, and you're going to be the guy. That being said, if the Georgias and Alabamas of the world are coming in, the Ohio States of the world are coming in, you're probably not going to win that battle. So I don't want to sell false hope. Penn State already has Cooper Cousins, and that's a good start. Agard, a Philly kid, he got a ton of interest. Becca has a ton of interest. If I had to pick one that I think they would have the best shot at, it would be Martin, because he is a local kid. He's very proud of his, home state. He's a kid who seems to be down to earth. He's not an NIL seeker, and he likes that staff and he likes that offense because it's perfect for him. But everything could change between now and the time 2024 comes around, because the offense could change. The offenses other teams could change. Narduzzi could take another job. You have no idea what's going to happen. So right now, I'd say that's the guy that they're focusing on and they have the best shot at. But even if he commits tomorrow to someplace else, it's never over.
Yeah, right. You got a whole year ahead. Sure.
And so that's why it's way, way too early to even consider that. Like, Cooper Cousins from McDowell is committed to Penn State. Whoop-de-doo. It means nothing.
It's almost probably smart for kids not to get near committing this early, a year in advance. Like, let it play out a little bit. Let them court you.
They have nothing to lose. I would say.
Right. Yeah.
There's nothing. I'll commit to Penn State, whatever. And I'm not saying Cousins is this type of guy. Nothing to lose. Other teams are going to come in and try to. So it's really the coaches that have no kind of say in this.
And what will exist for the entirety of the year for the 2024 class that just started existing for PA kids that Rodney Gallagher already jumped on because he has an NIL deal while he's still in high school, is they'll be able to do that all year long. Like they'll be able to get out in front of that now and be able to go behind the Gallagher path there in PA. So that's a big deal. Mike Vukovcan, Mike Asti, Mike Farrell here talking on our Sports Now Network National Signing Day show. Mike, before we let you go, I do kind of want to bring up what Mike V and I talked about at the top of the show before we brought the guests on in terms of evaluating recruiting classes in this new era. We're in a transfer portal era. Pitt, top 50 class, but they're looking a lot to the portal to try to win now. West Virginia did that for years, but now they're admittedly trying to develop. Will that be a good or bad thing? It's kind of risky when you're on the hot seat. Penn State, you're winning 10 games in the Rose Bowl. You don't have to worry about the portal as much, but they certainly could get kids interested in that program and have dealt with transfers before. And you can quickly fix something in the portal as well as also see a mass exodus, which these programs have all endured. Jordan Addison leaving Pitt despite an ACC title. That clearly was a money grab. West Virginia losing a lot of kids to the portal, etc. So for you, is there any thinking for you in terms of giving these ranks, in terms of giving letter grades, and when you evaluate and when you write articles for us on, I got to do something new and change something because just doing it the simple grade off of a recruiting class isn't really fair. Is there any way you're going to be able to include a transfer situation when you're grading an off-season overall? Or are recruiting grades and evaluation rankings maybe overrated now because of the portal?
Well, the high school grades and rankings are overrated because of the portal. I mean, there's so many kids that in this class that we're talking about and losing sleep over and all that are going to be in the portal after spring or after their freshman season. So that's overrated. The calendar itself isn't conducive a lot to ranking a combination class. It's more so now because they do have this stupid window. I hate the window, the 45-day window, but at least it lumps everything together. You've got your early signing class ranking for high school. Then you've got your February signing day, and you've got most of the portal done. And then you've got the 15 days after the spring. So the way I think it should be done, and I haven't figured out if I'm going to do this or not yet, I'm still doing team rankings for high school and team rankings for the portal. And I don't have a mathematical system. I'm all subjective now. I hated the mathematical system. It was something that was thrown upon us because we didn't want any bias. But people still think we're biased. I mean, what's the point of having a mathematical system if you're just going to be accused of bias anyways? And the mathematical system says, well, it's the math that did it, not me. Yeah, but you rank the individual players, and those formulas go into the overall team formula. So if you're biased towards a team, you're going to rank those kids higher. It's just subjective is the way to go. I think more of an emphasis should be put on your portal ranking than on your high school ranking, because those kids are less likely to double portal. Of course, JT Daniels is on his 15th school, but that's rare.
He's the Van Wilder of college football.
Yeah, it's very rare. Yeah. So, and we see USC didn't have a great recruiting class last year as far as nationally. Lincoln Riley's first year kind of held back a lot of scholarships. I don't even know where they finished, but it wasn't like, it was solid, but it wasn't top 5, top 10 or whatever. Right. But their portal, they brought in 28 kids. Yeah. And the portal is all that mattered because Kayla Williams was in the portal. Jordan Addison was in the portal. Mario Williams was in the portal. Everybody who played and made a big part of that roster was in the portal. So for me, if you're a fan, I think what you should do is focus on the high school rankings, focus on the portal rankings. But if they were combined, if somebody does combine them, mathematical or not, I think it should be more of a 65-35 split with an emphasis on the portal rankings, which is great news for Pitt. Because like I said, if you have a dud of a class, you can make up for it in the portal. It's not so great news for West Virginia because they kind of struggle in the portal a little bit. But a lot of that, I think, is Neil Brown not being, he's been on the hot seat for a couple of years now. And for Penn State, I think it's really good for them because they do a good job and a solid job in the portal. So that's how I would do it. 65-35 portal now. And I think that's going to get bigger percentage for the portal as we move on because high school recruiting it's not fading away, but it's becoming less important.
All right, last question, Mike. You're the godfather. I've respected you for years. That's why I got into this business, is because of reading your stuff over the years. So you have a feel for what's going to happen. Deion Sanders is the talk of college. We're just going to switch here
to say the least.
The talk of college football. He's making a lot of headlines. Is this a long-term thing, or do you see this flaming out as far as him having the passion to do this for a long time, or was this just a 3, 4, 5 year thing and then he's done?
Well, he'll coach. I think he has a passion for coaching. Now, again, Deion's very hard to predict, but he's always been into coaching. Back when he cropped up those high school teams that failed, and he was always a guy who was around the Under Armour game and has a passion for coaching and teaching kids. So for him to get into coaching is not a big surprise to me. Colorado's a surprise. He'll be there for 2 years, and that's the shelf life of his son at quarterback there.
Right.
And then he's gone. But he'll go to a bigger program. I mean, Florida State may welcome him back if Norvell sort of, recedes a little bit, or some
They
other
weren't
program
interested in him last year. That was kind of
Well, they will be, because what they're going to see here.
his value is higher, I guess, now as a coach.
Well, and we're also going to see more celebrity type head football coaches because
Sure.
of Deion Sanders
On the higher level, not just HBCUs, because we've seen those with former players at the HBCU level.
Yeah.
But now he's going to pave the way for Power 5.
Oh, and I'm
Right.
trying to think of the next guy who it could be. You know, I don't really know. You know, it could be. You know,
Well, Eddie
we
George
see,
is currently coaching in the HBCU, not having
Yeah.
success with Deion. People thought Ryan Leaf would go into coaching. He's more into media now.
Trent Dilfer's in coaching now. He's in a group of 5. They're not Deion though. I'm trying to think of, like, you know,
Deion's
Peyton-
pizzazz, like
would
that
a Peyton
swagger's a little
Manning,
different.
You know, would a
Or-
Peyton Manning
okay.
ever be interested in being
Okay.
a head football coach at a college level? Those type of guys would really move the needle.
I'll ask this because I know West
Go
Virginia
ahead.
fans ask this literally, actually, and I'll let you go on then. Pat White has had a career of coaching. He's currently an assistant with the Chargers. He's been at programs, USF
Mhm.
and even lower. There are some that actually want him on the staff or would want him hired if Brown is fired. Is that insanity, or is there now more of a chance of those things because of Deion?
There's a chance. Pat White is one of the best college football players you're ever going to see, ever. And still, the general fan base doesn't know who he is, nor do the recruits. Deion is like
Okay.
that guy.
Sure, that's fair.
I think Pat White would be a great addition to the West Virginia staff, just like Denard Robinson at Michigan and things like that. Bring back former
Drew
players. One of
Brees.
Cadillac Williams at Auburn. You know, those guys are going to be successful in that area because they're well known. You know, Deion's going to go. Well, this is a 1-11 football team. He's going to go 5-7 next season, maybe 6-6 the following season. Leave for a bigger job, but leave Colorado in such a better place with NIL.
Mhm.
They've reduced their academic restrictions now. He's going to leave that roster in a much better place. That's kind of what you're going to see. You're going to see the smaller schools or the middling schools that are struggling hire big name guys that will come in for a couple of years, stepping stone it, and change their entire infrastructure because NIL is so important. The biggest thing Deion's going to do for Colorado is change that NIL collective. That's it. And that's the most important thing that he could possibly do. And Colorado's going to be in great shape because of that. So, yeah, it's a trend.
Yeah.
I don't like it. I don't think he's a good coach. No offense to him. I don't think he's a good coach. He had the best roster. Not even close. The best roster. So prove to me that you – I'm trying to think of an example of a team that was so exponentially better. Even Alabama during the dynasty wasn't exponentially better than the runner-up team. Prove to me you can do it at the college level when you're not the best roster, then I'll believe in you. But right now I don't. So
as you mentioned, though, if he gets 6 wins in a bowl game in Colorado after what they've endured for 20 years, he'll be thought of as Vince Lombardi nationally. Like he'll get talked about very positively off of just a bowl appearance.
Wow, listen, people are already talking about Colorado's the new Alabama, so there's a lot of idiots out there.
No, I hear you.
I mean, I've heard everything about everything.
But the bar's not that high that he has to do, though. He doesn't have to do that much. 5-7, that'll be a positive turnaround from 1 win.
It's a smart move in a way because you can't get worse than 1-11.
The bar is low. Yeah.
Right. You know, so listen, all power to him. I don't dislike the guy. I mean, it's very flattering. He follows me on Twitter. I DM with him every once in a while. Well, listen, I'm a huge Deion fan. I'm a Cowboy fan. But I grew up following Florida State and
it's intriguing if nothing else.
Atlanta and San Francisco and Dallas. It's great. I love him.
Yeah.
You know, but I don't know if he can coach. But for Colorado, 1-11. This is the move you make. West Virginia, if they were 1-11 and they wanted to target Deion and he was interested, they should hire him in a second because it's going to change everything about your program. Yeah. And that's what's necessary. That's why more celebrity hires are going to be. Pat White, love you. You're not a celebrity hire.
No, I just brought him up because he's the one in coaching. They do obviously have bigger name celebrities that are involved, but
Randy
that's even
Moss.
why.
How about Randy Moss? There's a coach that he can't coach a lick. But you bring him to West Virginia.
Pac-Man Jones.
Well, I mean, Randy Moss. That is the biggest name in wide receiver history other than Jerry Rice. He comes to West Virginia. 2 years, West Virginia is a completely different program because of him, and he may not be able to coach a lick.
I don't know if he'd want to, though, because he has a personal problem against WVU that goes way back to high school days, and then he ended up at Marshall, as we know.
He wouldn't, but he's the West Virginia version of Deion Sanders.
No, 100%. No, I get what you're saying, and that's why it was a fantastic hire for Colorado for sure, and we'll see what happens. I'm sure others will jump aboard. The bar is very, very low. They're very, very intriguing, to say the very, very least, and Deion is kind of one of those guys that if he's with you, you love him. If he's not with you, you're kind of annoyed by him. Yeah, and we'll see. Maybe he's at Florida State in the future. Maybe we'll see if he locks in there or if he keeps on jumping. If he ever gets to FSU, does he stay there for a period of time? Since it does seem like he does actually like coaching, but he's also likes the money, as Prime Time has told you for 35 plus years.
More than the money, he likes the attention.
He likes the attention, 100%. Yeah,
the attention. So he'll jump around a lot.
He's an egomaniac for sure, which is a positive for him in his career. Mike, we definitely appreciate the time for sure. You're definitely the godfather, to say the least. Obviously, we appreciate all your work with us throughout the Sports Now family of networks. All that will keep on coming at Pittsburgh Sports Now, WVSN, and Nittany Sports Now. Mike V, anything else for?
No,
Mike
it's on to
Farrell?
2024. We get off this call here.
How about you a little plug for the portal report too? Yeah, it's kind of.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. The portal report, absolutely.
Guys, you know,
yeah.
Absolutely.
My whole thing is, now that I'm independent, I want to move the needle for people, but I also focus on my own site too. So it's a tough balance. Pitt, West Virginia, Penn State's easy for me because my site doesn't focus on that much. The portal, man, I'm telling you, it's a gold mine, and eventually we'll have to talk about merging, because I think if we merge, we would be unstoppable when it comes to the portal.
Well, taking over the world is always something that'll
if that's the case, Mike, I'm going to be booking a flight, and we're going to meet face to face, and we'll.
Well, I also think you guys can build out your network too.
Yeah.
I really do believe you can move into different states. I think it's a great 3-site network.
Sure. Yeah.
We got a chance to.
Oh yeah,
move even higher.
Oh, it's in our brain as well. That's not the first time that's been thought about. Absolutely, this thing's on the feelers. But yeah, absolutely, taking over the world is something that we also will enjoy as well. But nonetheless, here we are, and National Signing Day now is over. It is a portal world, but the college kids and the high school kids and the National Signing Day is still kind of trying to all live in it and marry all of it together. So Mike Farrell, MikeFarrellSports.com, by the way, is his site that he also contributes to, of course, and runs, and then the Portal Report, in addition to WVSN, PSN, and Nittany Sports Now. So, Mike, we definitely appreciate the time. That was Mike Farrell. Again, Mike Vukovcan, Mike Asti. So, Mike, National Sign Day now is behind us. We can maybe, grab a cold one.
It's almost behind us. There's still
it's never over officially, but true. Yeah.
Yeah, there'll be another day in first Wednesday and first.
Right. This is the early period.
February.
Yeah.
But that'll be probably a lot more about transfers and stuff. But there are some guys who chose not to sign, and will sign at the All-American game and some other things. But 80-90% of the recruiting for this year is done, and coaches are looking at the 2024 roster or their roster next year, and we'll see.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's multiple ways to skin a cat here in terms of portal, no portal, recruiting, develop, whatever you want to do. We'll see who's right and who's wrong, and definitely seems like a portal world that we're all living in nonetheless. So that seems to be the way to go. But if you can't have success there, then maybe you have to go another route. And maybe we will see more former players of the Deion Sanders route to come in. Honestly, the one example, and he's not going to coach for a very, very long time, Drew Brees. Purdue brings in Drew Brees to be on the staff for a bowl game, maybe a little bit after, and all of a sudden they're stealing an offensive coordinator. They were just in the Big Ten title game, but only because of the division format. They weren't really that great, but those type of big names maybe could bring a pizzazz to the program and help them recruiting wise. We'll see if that worked for them or not. But again, Pittsburgh Sports Now, WV Sports Now, Nittany Sports Now, and of course the Portal Report for all of our coverage of the portal and recruiting. And then of course, MikeFarrellSports.com for Mike's individual site as our takeover of the world of college athletics, as well as the high school game, and of course recruiting and the portal continues on.